Hello friends, in this session I'm going to talk on the further subject on the subject of Pentateuch. Now the first 5 books of the Bible, that is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers and Deuteronomy, are said to be as the Pentateuch. The word Pentateuch means 5 and the 5 scrolls. So the first 5 books in the early periods, they were written on the scrolls, and the historians and the theologians have found these scrolls, and they collectively, the 5 books of the Bible, they have called it as Pentateuch. These are the 5 independent books written in an unbroken way, and it is a continuity of the historical sequence with the succeeding books beginning from Genesis to Deuteronomy. Now, these books were written approximately in the year of 1804 BC, and then it continues till 1525 BC, where we found the Exodus is taking place. Now, the books of the Bible, these 5 books of the Bible, not only they deal with the historical events, but also they give the moral, ethical values to the community in those days, that is of the Jewish community or the Israeli community. Now, the Exodus is one of the prominent books in the 5 Pentateuchs, because it tells the God's work among the early Israelites when they were under the bondage for 430 years. We look at the book of Genesis. It all begins with a narrative story of beginning, how the world came into existence, and how the other planets, the stars, and the oceanic life, the terrestrial life, and the creation of the human beings is narrated in the book of Genesis. Also, the book of Genesis gives a narrative story about the great flood of Noah, where a part of the world was been destroyed, and God has to make something new after the flood. So it also gives a lot of enumeration on the subject of the creation and its order. Also, when we look to the book of Leviticus, Leviticus is mostly a kind of the day-to-day activity, the kind of the life that has to be led is emphasized in the book of Leviticus, probably written by Moses and followed by the Levites, a community who have been separated to observe the priestly laws and the priestly duties. So ceremonially, the book gives a lot of ceremonial entities, the ceremonial laws in the early Israel where they used to follow. So Leviticus also gives about the Lord's commandments about the children of Israel and about what has happened in Mount Sinai. We also look into when we also look into the book of the Numbers, one of the book, where we see that the Levites commences with God's commissioning with Moses at the tabernacle of meeting, and this time it is the time where the census are being prepared. So Leviticus is a book where we see a lot of census about the people and their social and economic system in those days or in those era. Now, the book records a lot of the wars and a lot of commitment, what they were doing in the wilderness, and how God used to trust them, and how the people of Israel were trusting God with some rituals. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, it's a chapter which tells more about about the Israelites' feast. It's a ritual where it's been opened to the Israeli people after the 430 years of bondage, where they would celebrate independently their festivals, and they had now the identity and image as a nation. Now, when we look to the basic events, what has happened in the first 5 books of this Bible, of the Pentateuch, also called in the Hebrew language as Torah, we see that the the 15th day of the first month, the first year, the Exodus event takes place, and it's been recorded in the Exodus chapter 12. Now, in the 15th day, second month of the first year, they are arriving at the wilderness of Sin, Exodus chapter 16, verse 1. And in the third month of the first year, they arrive in the wilderness of Sinai, and they erected a tabernacle in commemoration to God of Israel as Yahweh. You also see in Numbers chapter 7, verse 1. Now, on the 14th day of the first month of the second year, the Levites, the entire Israeli group, they observed the Passover, which is recorded in the Numbers chapter 9, verse 5. The first day of the second month, when the census was taken in the Numbers chapter 1, verse 1, where we see that a systematic order of a census has been taken, that how many people were there and what kind of work they were doing, and there is a classification according to the work what the people were performing in those days or those era. Now, they departed from the Mount Sinai the second year, the month in the second on the 14th day in the second month of the second year, where they celebrated the Passover, and they departed from Sinai on the second month of the second year. That is been recorded in Numbers chapter 10, verse 11. Also, we find and we see that the first day of the fifth month, the death of Aaron takes place, recorded in Numbers chapter 20, verse 20 to 22, and the 33rd chapter and 38th verse. The first day of the 11th month, and then the 14th year, Moses addresses in the book of Deuteronomy, which is also called as the book of the second law, the book of Deuteronomy, which has been given to the people of Israel for the national laws to be obeyed when Moses brings the law of the Lord to the people of Israel. Well, if you read Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 12, it says something like this: "Gather the people together, men and women and little ones, and the stranger who is within your gates, that they may hear and that they may learn to fear the Lord your God, and carefully observe all the words of this law." So here we see that as a nation, the law is been given in order to make the people systematically arranged within their system how they should observe the national constitution. The law that we see in the Deuteronomy, it was regulating several things within the nation. For example, there was a tendency among the people to fight, or to murder, or to commit adultery, or to bear false witnesses. We see that when the book of Deuteronomy is being presented very nicely to the people of Israel, they got the national constitution as a law so that they may observe and keep it and do not fall into any kind of mishaps within the nation. Now, the relationship between The command is a very important aspect where the people must be gathered to hear the law in order to learn what is required of them and what it has to say about God. So the people must gather in the assembly, they must hear the law and keep them and know that what God intends from his people or from their people. The second important aspect that we see, learn about the Lord in order to fear Him based on the correct understanding of who He is. Now, who is Lord? What is His heart? What is His mind? In what way He is supposed to train up His people is a second important point that we see in the book of Deuteronomy. The third point that we see, the fear of the God in order to be correctly motivated to obedience and good works. The good works performed for any other reason will be improperly motivated. The priest taught the law to the families. Now, this is a very important point, because the fear of the Lord, when we fear any government structure or any of the hierarchy, we don't commit whatever we want. We are under the subject of regulation. So perhaps the first constitution within the world histories that we see, that the fear of the Lord was an important element that has brought the fear upon the people to do the good works. It was about the good works. You can't steal from someone, or you can't bear false witnesses regarding anyone, which is a very common tendency which separates us from God and the people. And priests, they were teaching the law to the families, and to keep them, how to keep them, what is its significance, what is its theological element. The priests were teaching to the local congregations and to the families. It's also been recorded in Malachi chapter 2 verse 4 and 7. The parents were instructed how the children to give the respect within their homes, and we find these kind of references in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4 onwards. Now, instruction in the law is short and would be provide the right foundation for the Old Testament believers and the relationship with God. So it was more about the relationship that 5 books of the first 5 books of the Bible brings a very close relationship with the people and with the God. And we see that because the Israelites, they had a very good knowledge about who God is, about the world and its affairs, how God is dealing with them, is being enumerated in these 5 books of the Bible. So hence now, Israelites were having a very good knowledge about the world, because they were the slaves under the Egypt for 430 years. They were some of the ancestors in the ancient Mesopotamia. They had a very good knowledge about the God who existed and who controlled everything and every affairs of the world. So hence the 5 books of the Bible brings a better understanding God and the people and its relationship. So we also see that Genesis chapter 1 to 11, it helps us to understand the origin and nature of creation. It helps us to understand the human labor, the sin, the marriage, murder, death, bigamy, judgment, multiplicity of languages, cultures, etc. So these chapters establish the world view that explains the remainder of the Israel's first Bible, which is called as a Pentateuch. The late portion of the Genesis explained to Israel who they were, including the purpose the God had for them as people. Now, if you go through Genesis chapter 12 from verse 1 to 3, God had appeared to Abraham and made a threefold promise to give him a land, a descendants, and blessings. So we see that in the later part of the book of Genesis, that Abraham was blessed in the three areas, that he was being given a land, he became the father of many nations and had many descendants, and not only that, his blessings was immense in all form and in all nature. Genesis reminds us that how God's promises are being fulfilled, and focuses on the seed and the descendants of the Abrahamic lineage. The rest of the Pentateuch looks at the same way the promises from Genesis chapter 12 to verse 1 and 3, and it explains about more of the Abrahamic covenant. It explains more about the initial stages, that how the people have been kept their promises and how God has kept their promises. Exodus and Leviticus focuses more on the blessings and the relationship with God. In Exodus, Israel meets God and their fathers and is led forth by him from the Egypt to the promised land. Leviticus underscores a meticulous care with which the people and the priests were approached God in worship and their dimension of their lives. Holiness, cleanliness come together in a simple and a practical way. Number and Deuteronomy focuses on the journey and journey and the preparation for the promised land, and the Pentateuch treats many issues related to the Israel's relationship with God. But the underlying theme of the Pentateuch is initially the unfolding fulfillment of the God's promises made to Abraham. And so we will deal with each book of the Bible individually, with its titles, with its author and date, with its background and setting, with its the basic who are the key people in the particular book. We also see some historical and the theological themes, and we also see the overall the questions that is being often being asked when we read either any of the books of the Bible. We will also understand the key words which are there in the particular chapter, which is more being emphasized, and then we have the key doctrines where we try to understand the basic idea, the basic features in learning and understanding of these books. So we'll come across with so many different types of the doctrines, which helps us. Doctrines are teachings or the basic principles that particular book will be based on. And also we will see some of the characteristics of God in each book, that how he deals with his people and with its interpretative challenges. So we'll also deal with the basic outline of each books. So dear friends, Bible values. In this particular episodes, the overall Bible will be understood in this way, and each book will be dealt differently, very systematically, and with a lot of information that will be helping you in understanding each book of the Bible. God bless you. Thank you so much.